image like no other, inspiring decades of research and debate. The Shroud of Turin, that's a piece of history, and it has an ongoing puzzle for science.
The Shroud of Turin is a burial cloth that's imprinted with what many believe is the actual image of Jesus after his crucifixion. Now, it's been debated for years, but the shroud is back in the headlines in a major way.
Over 2,000 years ago, a man named Jesus Christ was born, someone who would become one of the most influential figures in all of human history. He carried out his ministry in the region of Judea, boldly claiming to be the Son of God. That claim ultimately led to his crucifixion. But according to Christian belief, after 2 nights in a tomb, Jesus rose from the dead. That resurrection is the foundation of the Christian faith, a moment that changed everything. And tied to that moment is one of the most mysterious and hotly debated artifacts in the world, the Shroud of Turin. Many believe it could be physical evidence of Christ's resurrection. While earlier carbon dating tests led much of the scientific community to label it a medieval forgery, the shroud has been studied and re-examined for decades. And despite the skepticism, new discoveries keep emerging, as if something beyond us keeps pulling this relic back into the spotlight. Some believe it may actually bear the imprint of Christianity's most sacred moment, the resurrection of Jesus. And now, a stunning new discovery has added fresh fuel to the debate. Researchers have found what appears to be a name inscribed on the shroud, which some are calling undeniable proof of its authenticity. But before we dive into that discovery, let's take a step back. The Gospel of John mentions burial cloths left behind in Jesus' empty tomb, details that helped convince John of the resurrection. Over the centuries, many have wondered, could the Shroud of Turin be one of those cloths? Still, questions linger. Doubts remain. Its true origin has never been definitively proven. And then came the moment that nearly closed the case for good: carbon dating. In 1988, 3 world-class labs tested a sample of the linen. Their conclusion? The shroud was made sometime between 1260 and 1390 AD, squarely in the Middle Ages. The mystery, it seemed, was over, but it wasn't. Almost immediately, new questions emerged. Was the sample taken from a corner that had been repaired after a fire? Could threads added centuries later have skewed the results? As more years passed, newer and more advanced studies began suggesting something shocking. The shroud might actually be far older, possibly dating all the way back to the 1st century. And then, something unexpected entered the picture: artificial intelligence. Today, advanced AI is analyzing the shroud in ways never before possible, studying every pixel, every detail, and what it's revealing feels almost unexplainable. Some of the findings are being described as otherworldly. From lifelike facial reconstructions to simulations showing bursts of energy that go beyond the limits of known physics, AI is forcing us to rethink everything, from science and history to the very idea of resurrection itself. This isn't just a battle between belief and skepticism. This is about an object that refuses to be easily explained, even in a world where we expect every mystery to have a solution. Why does the image act like a photographic negative, long before photography was ever invented? Why has no artist, ancient or modern, ever managed to recreate it? And why, after hundreds of tests and decades of research, do we still have no idea how it was made? As the world stands at the intersection of cutting-edge technology and timeless theology, one question rings louder than ever. What really happened in that tomb 2,000 years ago? Stick with me, because in this video, we're going deep into the full story, how a simple piece of cloth became the most analyzed artifact in all of Christianity. Why have decades of scientific testing only made the shroud more mysterious? And could artificial intelligence, the most advanced tool of our time, finally unlock its secrets? Or is this one of those rare mysteries that was never meant to be solved? This is the story of the Shroud of Turin, a relic that refuses to fade, a question that refuses to go away, and a mystery that could forever change how we see faith, science, and history. The shroud didn't burst onto the scene with angels or divine fanfare. It entered history quietly, wrapped in silence and cloaked in mystery. The first confirmed mention of it comes from the 14th century, in a small French town called Relics. A local knight, Geoffroy de Charny, claimed he possessed something extraordinary, the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. But no one could say where it came from or how it had survived. It bore no royal seal, no sacred documentation. Just a man's word and a strip of linen marked with an image that defied logic. The church was cautious. It didn't condemn the relic, but it didn't confirm it either. So for centuries, the shroud remained in a kind of limbo, revered by some, dismissed by others. Pilgrims came to gaze at it. Scholars came to study it. But the truth stayed just out of reach. Then, in 1898, everything changed. During a public exhibition, an Italian lawyer and amateur photographer named Secondo Pia set up his camera to capture the shroud. Later that night, in his darkroom, he developed the negatives and froze. What appeared on the film stunned him. The image of the man on the shroud, barely visible to the naked eye, was suddenly clear, hauntingly detailed, startlingly lifelike. The negative revealed more than the original ever had. The faint, ghostly markings suddenly took shape, a face, a body, a haunting image of pain and suffering. Word of the discovery spread quickly. Headlines called it a miracle. Scientists labeled it a mystery. For the first time, the shroud wasn't just a historical relic. It had become an enigma, an image behaving like a photographic negative, created centuries before photography even existed. But that was just the beginning. Over the decades, researchers have studied every inch of the cloth, and what they found was astonishing. There were no signs of paint, no pigments, no brush strokes. The image wasn't painted or drawn, it wasn't even embedded in the fabric. It sat on the surface so shallow it barely touched the fibers. Then microscopic analysis uncovered something unexpected, traces of pollen, some from plants not native to Europe but to the Middle East. In fact, several species are found only in the area around Jerusalem, and the intrigue only deepened. Blood tests confirmed the stains on the cloth were real human blood, type A, a relatively rare blood group even today. But this wasn't just random smearing. The blood patterns matched the wounds described in the Gospels. Pierced wrists and feet, a wound in the side, and blood around the scalp, just like from a crown of thorns. For many believers, the evidence felt undeniable. For skeptics, the details were deeply unsettling. How could a medieval artist have captured things that weren't even known in his time? Why show nails driven through the wrists when every crucifix of that era showed them in the palms? And how could the anatomy be so precise, far beyond the skill of most medieval painters? Then came a turning point that nearly shattered centuries of belief. In 1988, 3 world-renowned laboratories, Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona, conducted radiocarbon dating on samples taken from the shroud. The results seemed definitive. The fabric dated between 1260 and 1390 AD. For many, that was it. Mystery solved. The shroud wasn't ancient. It was medieval. A clever forgery. Headlines shouted, "Shroud proven fake." Museums moved on. Scholars closed the case. Skeptics rejoiced. Believers were devastated. But the shroud wasn't done telling its story. Almost immediately, questions began to surface. Textile experts pointed out something odd. The sample used for testing didn't match the rest of the cloth. It seemed to contain cotton fibers, possibly added during repairs after the fire of 1532. If that were true, the test results might have been completely off. And just like that, the debate reignited. New research began to suggest that the original linen could be much older than the tested sample indicated. The mystery was far from over. As the 21st century began, technology brought tools that medieval artisans could never have imagined: scanning electron microscopes, spectral imaging, chemical analysis. But instead of solving the mystery, each new test raised more questions. And still, the shroud endured. It had survived fires, wars, skeptics, and scientists. It remained intact, unchanged, and continued to stare back at us with that same silent, haunting face. But the biggest twist was still to come. Because the next chapter wouldn't just be about history or theology, it would take the shroud into completely uncharted territory. A place no one ever expected. A world of algorithms, neural networks, and artificial intelligence. And what AI would uncover would leave everyone stunned. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin had resisted explanation, standing firm against every test and challenge thrown at it. But no one predicted that its next confrontation wouldn't come from archaeologists, theologians, or historians, but from machines, from artificial intelligence. This technology, designed for the digital age, was now staring directly into one of humanity's oldest and most mysterious artifacts. It all started quietly, just a small experiment. High-resolution images of the shroud were uploaded into an AI-powered image generation platform. The instructions were simple. The task was simple: reconstruct the man behind the cloth. No divine assumptions, no miracles, just pure data. But what happened next was beyond anything anyone expected. As the AI processed millions of microscopic details, the way light played off the fibers, the shadows in the weave, the subtle contours barely visible to the eye, an image began to take shape on the screen. It wasn't a glowing religious icon. It wasn't the soft, idealized Jesus from Renaissance paintings. It was something raw, human, strikingly real. A rugged Middle Eastern man, olive-toned skin, a thick beard, hair tangled with blood, and eyes, deep-set, weary, filled with both pain and a quiet sense of peace. Walang halos, no golden light, just the bruised and broken face of someone who looked like he had truly suffered. Then came the shock. Anthropologists compared the AI-generated face to forensic reconstructions of first-century Jewish men. The match was uncanny. The facial proportions lined up. The bone structure was nearly identical. Even the wounds were consistent with known Roman crucifixion methods. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #AIJesus and #Shroud Decoded began trending worldwide. Some called it a digital miracle. Others brushed it off as nothing more than a high-tech illusion, warning that AI is often trained on religious artwork. But here's the twist. This image didn't come from the AI's imagination. It wasn't a mashup of old paintings or guesswork. It came directly from the shroud's own data. Every mark, every stain, every subtle pattern in the cloth guided the reconstruction. This wasn't fantasy. It was extrapolation. And what it revealed caught everyone off guard. As researchers fed more prompts into the system, referencing the bloodstains, scorch marks, and the mysterious photographic negative effect, the AI began producing something even more astonishing. It generated an image of a body that seemed to float just above the cloth, surrounded by a faint glow. The AI wasn't programmed to depict resurrection. It wasn't trying to be symbolic. It was simply running a simulation, attempting to visualize how the image on the shroud might have formed if it was caused not by pressure, but by some kind of energy. Light appeared to radiate from the points where blood had once soaked into the linen. The figure looked weightless, like the cloth had recorded not death or decay, but some kind of transformation. These new images spread quickly, igniting passionate debate across the internet. Some headlines asked, "Did AI just show us what resurrection looks like?" Others dismissed it as nothing more than a digital trick. Skeptics were quick to remind everyone, AI isn't divine. It doesn't believe, it predicts. Yes, AI builds from data and from bias. And skeptics are right to point that out. The program doesn't have faith. It doesn't understand theology. But here's the unsettling part. If bias influenced the results, then why didn't the AI generate the familiar face of Jesus, the one from stained glass windows or Renaissance paintings? Why did it look historically accurate? Why did it resemble forensic reconstructions of first-century Jewish men? Was it just coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the shroud holds more hidden truth than anyone ever imagined. For believers, the AI experiment felt like a modern echo of ancient faith, like a silent voice from the past speaking through today's most advanced technology. For skeptics, it was yet another reminder that the shroud still raises more questions than it answers, questions that resist easy explanations. And so, the mystery deepens. Because if artificial intelligence, equipped with the most powerful algorithms we have, can't explain the shroud, but only make it more mysterious, what does that say about the cloth? And what does it say about us? One researcher may have said it best. If this is a forgery, it's the most sophisticated one in human history, and we still don't know how it was made. After billions of computations, thousands of simulations, and countless viral images, the shroud remains what it has always been, a paradox, a relic that refuses to give a final answer, but refuses to be forgotten. And beneath all the debate, one haunting question still lingers. What if this really is the face of the man who changed history? Because if that's true, then the shroud isn't just cloth. It's a photograph of eternity. What happens when science runs into something it simply can't explain? When algorithms built to analyze patterns suddenly brush up against the possibility of the miraculous? For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has existed in a strange space, caught between faith and skepticism, between devotion and doubt. But with the rise of artificial intelligence, the debate has entered entirely new territory. And now, one question stands out more than ever. Could this cloth be proof? Not of legend, not of art, but of resurrection. It's the theory that just won't fade. For decades, physicists and imaging experts have explored what's known as the radiation burst hypothesis, the idea. The image on the shroud wasn't painted or burned in. It was imprinted by an intense flash of energy, so powerful that it encoded three-dimensional information onto the cloth without burning the fibers. One study estimated that creating such an effect would require several billion watts of ultraviolet light, released in just a fraction of a second. Think about that. That's not something that could have been faked in medieval Europe. In fact, it doesn't match anything we know from nature or modern science. It's something entirely different, something that starts to sound eerily similar to the biblical account of resurrection, an instant, radiant burst of glory that transformed everything. Of course, skeptics call it speculation. They say theories like the radiation burst are just theology wrapped in science, and maybe to some extent, they're right. But here's the problem. Even with all our technology, no one has ever been able to recreate the image on the shroud. Not in the 14th century, not in the 21st. And by now, this isn't just about science or history. It's about something deeper, something human. Because while AI can generate faces and simulate light, it still can't answer the most important question of all. Why does this image move us? Think about it. In a world driven by proof, progress, and pixels, this ancient piece of cloth is trending on TikTok, going viral on Twitter, and sparking intense debates on YouTube. Why? Because deep down, people aren't just searching for answers. They're searching for meaning, for hope. The shroud reaches into something primal. It's not just a forensic mystery. It's a symbol of suffering, a faint echo of something beyond ourselves. In that blurred outline, in those blood-streaked features and pierced wrists, millions see more than an image. They see a story, one that speaks to pain, sacrifice, and the possibility of something greater. And now, through the lens of AI, that story feels alive again, reimagined, brought into our time. Picture it. You're standing in the 2025 digital exhibition at the Vatican, in the heart of Turin. Pilgrims and tourists quietly move past a high-resolution display of the shroud. There are no sermons, no explanations, just linen and mystery. On their phones, they scroll through AI-generated reconstructions. The bruised face, the calm expression, the strange glow that seems to suggest light, not death, created the image. Some visitors look skeptical, others stand silently, moved to tears. Because despite all the science, despite all the technology, the shroud doesn't give us certainty. It offers something else, a choice. The choice to believe or not. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the real mystery isn't in the threads of the cloth, but within us, in our deep hunger for meaning, in an age overflowing with information, in our quiet longing for something, or someone, who can break through despair and offer hope. The truth? I didn't solve the mystery. It made it feel more alive. It made the shroud more immediate, more haunting, more real to a generation raised on screens. To believers, it feels like a bridge between faith and reason. To skeptics, it's a riddle that refuses to be unraveled. And to everyone else, it's a question that keeps growing louder with time. What if this isn't just an image of death, but a glimpse of eternity? Even after centuries of study, the Shroud of Turin remains an unanswered question, a mystery that deepens with every attempt to explain it. Carbon dating once pointed to the Middle Ages, but newer imaging techniques hint at something much older. Blood analysis confirms real human wounds, yet no one has ever recreated the image using any known method. And now, artificial intelligence has joined the conversation, not to close the case, but to reopen it. From raw data, it produced a face unlike the traditional European depictions of Jesus, revealing instead a rugged Middle Eastern man marked by suffering. Was it truth, or just coincidence? Even AI can't say, but one thing is clear, the shroud still resists easy answers. Here's the reality. Science can examine fibers, trace bloodstains, and reconstruct faces, but what it can't measure is meaning. Why does this ancient cloth still capture the imagination of a modern world? Why do millions stop and listen when technology tries to decode something that's remained silent for centuries? Maybe it's because, at its core, this isn't really about linen at all. It's about the possibility of something greater, something beyond us. If the shroud is real, then it may have captured a moment that changed everything, the very instant death gave way to life. And even if it's not, it still speaks to something universal, our longing for hope. So where does that leave us? It brings us face to face with a question no algorithm can answer. What if the resurrection is real? If that question unsettles you, maybe it should. Because if this cloth truly witnessed the impossible, then everything changes, not just how we see the past, but how we imagine the future. So I'll leave you with this. The shroud may never give us absolute proof, but maybe proof was never the point. Maybe its true power lies in the invitation, to wonder, to question, and to hope.
Now it's your turn. What do you think? Is the shroud a brilliant forgery or the most important artifact in human history? Did AI bring us closer to the truth or simply remind us how much mystery remains? Let me know in the comments. I'll be reading every single one, because whether you believe or doubt, one thing is undeniable. This cloth refuses to be forgotten.